What plane spotting looked like just 10 years ago. N755NW, a 42-year-old NWADC 9-41 blasts out of STL. Happy New Year. Heck, Happy New Decade, while we're at it. With the closing of each year, I invest a considerable amount of time in reflection before setting my goals and aspirations for the future. A perennial resolution I have set, and then catastrophically failed to meet, has been to make sense of the 150k plus plane spotting photos I have amassed since diving into the hobby over the summer of 2009. While trying to determine what goal, if any, I would set around this, an intriguing question dawned on me. How has plane spotting changed in the past decade? Sure, we didn't have JetTip, ADSBexchange, or FLIGHTRADAR24 to allow for surgical, dare I say lazy, spotting. We just had to show up, maybe listen to ATC, and see what the day would bring. But how has what we might see changed? Well, I have photographic proof of what aviation looked like at a number of airports over the course of 2010. In retrospect, it was a good travel and spotting year for me. What if, perhaps, I set a mini goal to at the very least look at every photo shot over that 1 year and highlight particular items of note? I spent a number of hours over the past weekend doing just that. One clear difference? My skill and equipment have come a long way over the past decade. But I digress. Click through to join me for a stroll down AVGeek memory lane for a year which proved transformational to the AVGeek world. N3734B, a 737-800 departs Memphis in October 2010. Delta was still transitioning away from their early 2000s era colors in motion livery. Is that name not familiar? This paint attracted a lot of undue criticism and silly nicknames such as Wavy Gravy, Flowing Fabric, and my personal favorite, Delta Flit, due to the tail's similarity to that of Russian carrier Aeroflot. N755NC, DC 9-50 and former Northwest Bird lands in Kansas City in November 2010 wearing updated livery. The current day standard onward and upward livery had been announced in 2007 but was slow to roll out. So 3 years later there still existed a great deal of limited time only liveried Delta birds. N924XJ, a Northwest CRJ 900 accompanies some Delta birds in Denver. The Gem of Georgia was also hard at work integrating Northwest into their operations. Despite the merger closing in late 2008, opportunities to spot Northwest's various liveries and cool retro planes were still common. I would respectfully submit that the best spotting of 2010 was between the combined Delta and Northwest fleets. N763NW, a DC 9-41 lines up at St. Louis in September 2010. N826AY, a Northwest CR2 climbs out of Memphis in style one afternoon in October 2010. Americans' Mad Dogs shined with pride. N76200, an MD-83 pauses at the threshold of Kansas City's runway 19L for a quick photo in November of 2010. There's not much to report on the plane spotting front for American Airlines in 2010. The ubiquitous Super 80s lived up their name, they were super everywhere. And you'd be hard-pressed to visit any airport of significance and not see at least a few. Then, just as in 2019, eagle-eyed plane spotters could still find MD-80s carried over from the TWA buyout in 2001. Sadly, the American Airlines, former TWA, overhaul base at Kansas City International pictured above would be fully shuttered in September 2010. When it was shined up, that bare metal livery could sure put otherwise great liveries to shame. This photo was snapped in St. Louis, September 2010. N75433, a shiny, less than 2 years old Boeing 737-900ER spotted in Houston, December 2010. N14628, a short and stubby Boeing 737-500 spotted in Houston, December 2010. Isn't it refreshing to see the word Continental on the Continental livery? Folks will recall that 2010 was the year Continental would be absorbed by United. Much to the chagrin of many a Seoul-based tulip fan, United decided to co-opt Continental's paint scheme. United swiftly rebranded Continental's planes, in many cases leaving a bright and shiny new name patch on otherwise weathered paint. It wasn't a great look. N768UA, a Boeing 777-200 spotted at Dulles in October 2010. Complete with mismatched cowling, N781UA, A Boeing 777-200 and battleship livery spotted at Dulles in October 2010. While Continental's branding was eliminated with shocking speed, United took their sweet time in repainting their own planes. At the time, their fleet sported at least two legacy liveries, the Blue Tulip and an older predecessor which would affectionately be referred to as the battleship livery. Both paint schemes, we should note, incorporated different versions of the Sol-based tulip. Many reasonably speculated that between the hasty and sloppy process by which Continental's name was simply painted over and the slow conversion of United's fleet, a new livery had to be on the horizon. Who would have thought that it would take almost 10 years to come up with something, and that this something would be nothing more than a color adjustment? An 818MD, an Embraer ERJ-170 seen at Kansas City in November 2010. N170HQ, an Embraer ERJ-190 seen landing at Kansas City International in November 2010. In 2009, at the hands of ambitious CEO Brian Bedford, Republic Airways decided they had what it took to transition from regional operator to full-fledged big-time airline. Retroactive spoiler alert, they didn't. Republic scooped up Frontier and Midwest for $108 and $75 million, respectively. By 2010, the beautiful and iconic Midwest livery adorned Republic-owned and operated Embraer E-jets. Midwest was essentially dead, with the last 717 flight operated by Midwest employees occurring in 2009. N175HQ, an Embraer ERJ-190 preparing to leave Kansas City International in November 2010. 2010 would be the year Republic broke their commitment to keep the Midwest and Frontier brands distinct. Midwest would ultimately consolidate into Frontier. The joint airline was eventually sold off for a paltry $36 million in cash plus assumption of $109 million in debt. One great airline, significant combined market share, hundreds of jobs, and $38 million in wealth would vaporize at the hands of Republic. But at least we got to see the Midwest and Frontier liveries on Embraers, albeit briefly. Freight airlines had cool stuff in their fleets too. N429FE, an Airbus A310 named Connor, spotted in Memphis, October 2010. N267FE, a Boeing 727 named Jolene, spotted in Memphis, October 2010. FedEx still operated the smoky, loud, and sexy Boeing 727s. Additionally, a few Airbus A310s remained in the fleet. Remember those? They were the stubby small younger brother of the A300. While their final A310 was retired at the start of this year, the A300s still run to this day. Spot them while you still can. The 68 or so remaining are due to be fully retired by some point in 2021. N713AA, a Boeing 727 seen in St. Louis, September 2010. Speaking of the 727, let's not forget Capital Cargo International. Despite a tiny slice of Capi's 11-plane fleet being 727s, they sure got around. This carrier eventually merged with ATI, and with that, their 727s were allowed to retire. Many of 2010's airlines no longer exist. N937SP, a Pilatus PC-12 spotted in Memphis, October 2010. Of all the three essential air service carriers I sampled in 2010, Seaport was my favorite. They flew Pilatus PC-12s which were unique and comfortable given their small size. Additionally, what AvG could pass up MCI ROMEM routing for $155 one way? Sadly, Seaport ceased operations in September 2016. N240GL, a Beech 1900D in Kansas City, March 2010. Flying Great Lakes was not only my first experience, but the first propeller-driven aircraft I was old enough to